Everybody, we're going to for a couple of minutes to get started as people come into the workshop. It'll be about 2 minutes.
You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Oh my, time heals all, but you out of time now. Judge gotta watch us from the clock tower. Little tear gas cleared the whole place out. I'll be back with the hazmat for the next round. We was trying to protest and the fires broke out. Look out for the secret agents, they be planted in the crowd. Said it's civil unrest, but you sleep so sound like you don't hear the screams when we catching beat down. Staying quiet when they killing, but you speak loud when we ride. Got opinions coming from a place of privilege. Sicker than the COVID, how they did them on the ground. Speaking of the COVID, is it still going around? Won't you tell me about the looting? What's that really all about? Cause they throw away black lives like paper towels plus unemployment rate. What, 40 million now? Killed a man in broad day, might never see a trial. We just wanna break chains like slaves in the south. Started in the north end, but we in the downtown. Riot cops try to block, now we got a showdown. Down.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of California.
You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lies. Downtown, where I got popped with the rubber bullet tray pound. Got it in my name now. I'm a shooter. Never understand why they do it. Someone cut the channel off the news before I lose it. I ain't even tripping if you with it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Katie Harris. I am part of the Seattle MLK Organizing Coalition, and I am part of the workshop committee, which is presenting this series of 13 community workshops. I'm a white woman, an older woman with short gray hair and black glasses. And I am sitting in my home office in West Seattle. I'm going to give a brief overview of some housekeeping details, and then we're going to get started with the workshop. At the bottom of your screen is closed captioning, and you can see it. It's on the bottom right of your screen. There's a CC, and that is where you activate the captioning. We do have a chat feature, but the chat only works in one direction. If you post a message in the chat, the panelists will see it, but other attendees will not. If you would like to ask a question during the workshop, you can ask in the Q&A, and the presenters will have a designated time for answering your questions. So now let me tell you a little about the workshop that's coming up, and then I'll hand it over to the panel. The issues of communities of color are inseparable from the concerns of workers of color. In this panel, you're going to learn how constituencies of color are working together to advance common interests. Throughout the pandemic, they've been meeting regularly to build relationships. And in this workshop, they are inviting you to become familiar with their work and open doors to future participation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey Pereira, who's going to be your moderator for this panel.
Thank you so much, Katie, Ganesh, Shake, everyone who's joining this evening. I will be sharing my introduction as well in my ancestral and family's language of Tlingit, and we'll be translating for all of you, and then asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves using their name, pronouns, visual description of yourself, the constituency group you represent, and your union. So everybody that is joining this webinar this evening, you are in the right place. We're going to be talking about building power for working people. We have our agenda here on the screen. And before we get started, we want to acknowledge and honor both the MLK Junior Day Planning Committee and also recognition of the tribal land that we are on, the Duwamish people. Ganesh Chish Duwamish, Ganesh Chish Muckleshoot, Ganesh Chish Kosalish, Hin Shawat, Yuchat Duasak, Kleka Henach, Casey Marita Pereira, Yuchat Duasak, Chaak Nakhat Siti, Hutsit Ayahana Kahidi. So I shared both my Tlingit name and my English name after honoring the first people of the land that I'm joining y'all from, which is Kent, Washington, which is the unceded and disputed territories of the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Coast Salish peoples. I'm a Tlingit tribal member. I am a mixed race woman of color, light skin. I'm wearing black frames with long dark hair and red earrings in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, children, and families this evening. My Tlingit name is Hin Shawat, which means water woman. You can also call me Casey. And I am Eagle Moiety, and my house clan is Bear. Ganesh Chish, thank you. I lift my hands to everyone joining this evening. And I'm going to pass it to the next first of our panelists that I see on my screen to introduce herself, Sharika Carter.
Ganesh Chish, Casey. My name is Sharika Carter, and I use she, her pronouns. I am unapologetically Black with a gap tooth, and I am rocking a red lippy tonight. I'm wearing leopard frames, and my hair is in 2-strand twists, and I'm wearing a black shirt. I'm president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, Puget Sound chapter, and I am a proud OPIU Local 8 member.
Beautiful. And since Sharika's with the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, I will follow that line and pass it to Kevin.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kevin Allen, and I would describe myself as a middle-aged senior African-American. I wear glasses, I have a mustache, and short hair, and I'm wearing my gray Washington State Labor Council shirt today. I am a member of the Washington Federation of State Employees, Local 843, and I'm a member of CBTU and all of the constituency groups, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. I will pass it next to Gabriel.
Hello, everyone. All right, sorry, I was trying to get another meeting shut down. My name is Gabriel Prawl. I'm the president of the Seattle chapter of the A. Philip Randolph Institute. I'm also vice president on labor relations for the ILW Local 52. Back in 2019, I was the first Black to become a president of ILW local in the Pacific Northwest. And I also coast-wide co-chair of the African American Longshore Coalition. I consider myself Black African. And my grandparents were born, and most of my family were born in Jamaica. My grandfather moved to Panama. I was born there and then was raised in New York.
Thank you, Gabriel. We're also doing visual descriptions just for this brief introduction before we talk more about the work of our constituency groups. And I see you have a Puma hoodie sweatshirt on and glasses. Is there any other visual description you'd like to add?
And I have a bald head and some mustache and a beard.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much. Well, we have two other constituency groups of color represented here this evening. So I would like to invite our sisters from Apala who are joining to introduce yourselves as well. And we're doing name, pronouns, visual description of yourself, constituency group, and the union you are also a member of.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eunice Howe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the president of the Seattle chapter of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, also known as APALA. I am a 31-year-old Asian American woman. I'm Chinese American, and I have light skin, and I have black hair up in a bun today. And I'm wearing a red t-shirt in my home office with some lovely plants in the background. And I'm also a community organizer with Unite Here Local 8, the Hospitality Workers Labor Union.
Thank you so much, Eunice. I also wanted to say welcome and hello to Tracy and Amy who are joining us as well and supporting the workshop. In case you'd like to share or introduce yourself, feel free to do that now or in the chat. All right, and then last but not least, I saved the best for last, our newly reformed chapter of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, Representative and President Indira. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Indira Trejo, and I am, as Casey mentioned, the new president of the LACLA Pacific Northwest chapter. Super excited to be here with you all. My pronouns are she, her, and my visual description will be, I am a 37-year-old Mexicana, I don't know what else, with brown hair, dark brown hair, and some cool glasses that somebody told me today that I got on, and some purple lipstick. And I am wearing the earrings that my lovely niece Janetti made for me for Christmas. So I am excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. As you can see, our agenda for this evening, we just finished our welcome and introductions, and welcome to all of you. We will now be reviewing a brief 10 to 15 minute history of race and our local labor movement led by Brother Kevin Allen. We'll be taking some questions at the end, so feel free to use the question feature throughout. We'll be keeping track of that, and then with as much time as possible, we'll be sharing those questions with our panelists. So Kevin, I'm going to pass it to you.
Well, thank you so much, Casey. And if Casey didn't toot her horn, she's one of the only one who's a director of racial and gender justice for the Washington State Labor Council. And we're thankful that we have her available to us. We all should be thankful in the state of Washington for not only having the constituency groups, but having that kind of impact and the leadership from from our state labor federation. When I think about the 2022 MLK message and theme of the March and Rally, the theme is truth in education now. And I often say, you don't get engagement without orientation. And right now, we have a lot of disorientation going around, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. And so this is a time where we're going to have some truth, a little bit of truth and history. We're going to have a little bit of orientation, And hopefully out of all that, we're going to get some education right now about the past and what's going on right now. And we're going to be able to hopefully have some engagement with you out there today, and then engagement as we move forward into the future. And I think you'll find that theme, truth and education, now through all the workshops. So we'll all have an opportunity to do that. Now, when we talk about the history of labor, there's always been workers and bosses, including slave labor, and that's been since the beginning of time. So that's nothing new. Here in the US, there was always some type of organized labor from the beginning. There were craft unions, tailors, shoemakers, etc., and skilled tradesmen who always wanted to organize themselves to protect their rights, protect their work situation, and the prices for their labor against what they called diluted and cheap labor. Now, when you think about that, that means that the labor movement was built on exclusivity. And in America, you always have to figure racism is it's baked into the situation. So exclusivity was built in the system, and that's always been that way. And in the beginning, of course, labor was always pretty much looked at as it's a white man's thing. And for them, and everybody else was counterfeit. Even though the phrase, the real McCoy, really speaks about a black man, but that's a whole nother story. But we'll go on into that. So racism was baked in it, but there's always been a resistance, a force in labor that wanted to deal with equality and fairness for everybody, because that was also part of a little bit in the DNA. But as it often is the case, and we've seen that through history, and you'll probably hear more about that, oftentimes the idealistic part and the good part of what organized labor is supposed to be for everybody, as they said, that part has always been thrown under the bus to support the premise of white supremacy and exclusivity in labor. So there was always the ideal, but there was always something left out. And when you think about that being the case, that's been built in. Now, I know we have some slides thinking about the exclusion goes back from the beginning of time, but a couple of things we want to look at is like the Chinese Exclusion Act, where they just said, of course there was segregation for blacks, but there was the Chinese Exclusion Act that kind of, there's a picture there. That was in 1882. And they just said, well, okay, they're excluded. We're not going to include them. But there's always been a fight back and resistance. And what you see right here in this slide are some of the resistance that took place in 1912. In fact, on this day, January 11th, 1912, 110 years ago, was the famous Bread and Roses strike, which took place in Lowell, Massachusetts. And that was a situation where you had a lot of textile workers, mostly women and mostly immigrants and people of color, decided that they wasn't going to take the pay cut that the bosses were going to offer. And so they went on strike. And it was a brutal, bloody situation, as most of them were in that time. And even right here in Seattle, in 1919, we had the general strike, which was dealing with mostly dock workers and ship workers and everyone else that was involved that was organizing labor to say, we're tired of not getting no raises, and we want better working conditions. So there's always been a history of workers coming together in order to make better for themselves and for their families, and better for their communities. That's always been there. And so when we look at that situation and where we're at coming today, and we talk about this change, there's one person that I want to take a couple of minutes to park my car at to talk about, and it's on this slide right here, and it's on the left-hand side. He's the father of the Black labor movement. At one point in 1925, he was the most dangerous man in America. And if you didn't know, everybody should know the name of A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph, the organizer of the first officially sanctioned Black union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was put together and organized in 1925. And he stuck with it. And if you see that quote that's there, it's one of many, and I'll give you a few more later on. Freedom is never given, it is won. And in order just to even get the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters sanctioned by the AFL-CIO, the American Federation of Labor, that took almost 10 years to get that done. So, when we look at that type of situation, we know that it takes a lot of effort. Now, Asa Philip Randolph, the father of the Black trade labor movement, not only did he organize the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, but he fought to organize and got things done throughout the first half of the 20th century. He fought and organized to desegregate the armed forces and the workforce that was involved in the war effort in the 40s. He also helped and organized to desegregate the military. And he also did some things that changed laws in all kinds of areas. And he was also the one who organized the 1963 March on Washington, where most people remember Dr. King, but A. Philip Randolph and Bed Rustin were the ones who did it. So I just say that to the point of view that when you look at the constituency groups, all of them, the A. Philip Randolph Institute was the first one, formed in 1965. But the spirit that went into, from his leadership, we can find that in all of our constituency groups, because we all came out of the same cloth, where we've had to fight to get what we want in order to make the trade union be what it's supposed to be. A. Philip Randolph said, "The essence of trade unionism is social uplift. The labor movement has been the haven for the dispossessed, the despised, the neglected, the downtrodden, and the poor." So the part of the labor movement, he helped keep us focused in terms of being what we need to do. And all of our constituency groups have individuals or reasons why we started. And when you look at it, especially when you move into the 60s and 70s, and what we look at the civil rights era, the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists came up in 1972 as a response to AFL-CIO being neutral on Nixon. The Labor Council for Latin American Advancement was founded in 1973, and that comes as a result of the organizing of Cesar Chavez and United Farm Workers. The Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance was founded in 1992. We also have other constituency groups you might see on this flyer. The Coalition of Labor Union Women came in 74. Pride at Work for the Representative LGBTQ came in 1997. The Alliance for Retired Americans came in 2001. So all those groups came because in the end, if we left things like they are, we're going to get what we get, which we will get nothing, because racism and that inertia is like gravity, and you got to have some kind of resistance. And our constituency groups help make the resistance, help keep workers' rights on the forefront, do the work that we're supposed to do. And so that is a big part of the history of it moving on. Now, I'm not going to go too much further on that because we have people who will speak about each constituency group. But, you know, it's always important to remember that it takes that extra effort. And you'll hear from the members of APALA, APRI, CBTU, and LACLA as they discuss about what's going on. And one of the things that I want to say, that despite the history and the things that we talked about, it's still going on right now. This year they call it the year of Striketober, because in the old school days, strikes was old school and they tried to eliminate it. But it's not just what you think of, quote, Teamsters and longshoremen and those type of workers that go on strike. It's teachers and healthcare workers. And in particular, right here in Tukwila, we had the Cascade behavioral health workers. They went on strike from August until November for better working conditions, for safety, and protection for COVID. And these were mostly workers who were immigrants, mostly out of immigrants, women, people of color, who were getting a bad deal, and they had to come together. So we have people who are still using those tactics of striking today. And so that's important to go. So that's the now. And hopefully, as we go forward through this evening, you will hear from our various constituency groups of color. And then they will let you know what they're doing and what they're about for the now. So truth and education now. I've given you some truth. Hopefully you've got some education. You're going to hear about the past. You've heard about the past. You're going to hear about the now. And with that, hopefully you'll have the orientation and you'll be able to get the engagement. And feel free to ask questions, put them in the Q&A and in the chat, because this is a great opportunity that we have for us. And we're thankful to be here, and I'm thankful to be able to take a few minutes to share some of this background as we get ready to hear from the constituency groups of color and what they're doing in labor. So thank you for this time and an opportunity.
Thank you, Kevin. I know we're in a webinar, but I know if we could, we'd unmute and everybody would give you a round of applause. I, without further ado, would love to just get right to it with our panel. Just wanted to lift, and perhaps you see some familiar faces on the screen, as Kevin was saying, as we're looking towards the now and the future, just what local labor working people just like you and me have taken action. You might see yourself in one of these photos, but really, you know, you'll hear directly from leaders who are centering racial justice, gender justice, climate justice, and people most impacted, you know, in theme with MLK Day 2022, as well as the workshop this evening. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing so you can see everyone's beautiful faces. And I'm going to ask each of our constituency group leaders to just share a little bit more about who you are and why you're involved. Gabriel, I know you started getting into a bit of your family's background, and since A. Philip Randolph Institute is the first constituency group that was established, with the National AFL-CIO, I thought perhaps you could pick us up and maybe answer what's one exciting thing that you've done or the APRI is doing to advance the local labor movement for all people and especially people of color.
So we talk about children education, and we talk about the past and the future. And I want to tackle the past and where we can work our way to the future. So, Kevin talked about the education of the strike. And it's important that people know that Seattle 102 years ago had one of the biggest general strike. And in that strike, the owners of Capitol, along with their political handmaidens, were vicious in their attack on unions and workers. From Capitol perspective, unions weren't just bad, they were anti-Americans. Those who sided with workers' organizations were demonized, brutalized, attacked, locked up, or even killed. Now, I'm saying this because this month, and this Children Education, we are celebrating the legendary Dr. Martin Luther King, who was part of organizing the March on Washington with Byron Rustin and A. Philip Randolph. And I want people to understand that we're going to be true in education. We need to tell the story of the true fact of who Dr. King is. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was no moderate. Today, he's viewed as something of an American saint. His name adorns schools and street signs. His birthday, January 15, 1929, is observed as a national holiday in the third Monday each year. As we anticipate this year's celebration on January 17, we can expect Americans from across the political spectrum involve King's name to justify belief and actions. I know, but in this day, King was considered a dangerous troublemaker, just like Mr. Randolph. Both President John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson worried that King was being influenced by communists. King was harassed by the FBI and very vilified in the media. The establishment campaign derogate King's work. In August 1966, as King was bringing a civil rights campaign to northern cities to address poverty, slums, housing, segregation, bank lending, discrimination, the Gallup poll found that 63% of Americans had an unfavorable opinion of King, compared with 33% who view him favorable. And I'm saying this because there's some history here in Seattle that we need to share with our viewers as we speak truth to history. And I'm going to speak this part by mentioning Dr. Reverend Samuel B. McKinney, pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church. Had been King classmate at Monroe College in 1961. He invited the civil rights leader to Seattle and arranged for him to speak at First Presbyterian Church, a large facility that Mount Zion Baptist Church, but at this last minute, First Presbyterian leaders changed their minds, offering variety of excuse. Civil rights organization denounced the decision, and Reverend McKinney was forced to relocate or locate an alternate venue. The sudden turn of event added to the controversy surrounding the visit. McKinney found other venues on November 9th. Dr. King spoke at the UW campus, where more than 2,000 people heard him talk on segregation and the civil liberties, implication for students. That night, he was at Temple, the Urge, and the next day spoke at Garfield High School, and finally to a huge audience at the Eagles Auditorium in downtown. And I'm saying this because we got to understand that we have many leaders that have to deal with the struggle of when we fight for labor, when we fight for our community, that we get attacked. We are put in the position where we have to deal with the issue of controversy and even not having the right support because we're fighting for our community. The constituency groups here today, we have built a coalition together to work, serve the community, and also to be the benefit of labor in the work that we do. Black and people of color have made a huge contribution to this country, and they came from all over the world. And today, we, especially at A. Philip Randolph, our work is basically educating the truth to our community. It's working in the civil rights arena, fighting for making sure our community get an opportunity to be part of unions, part of the political process, and educating all this political process work. We are also part of serving our community. Some of the things that we have done at A. Philip Randolph is distribute turkey and the holidays for our community. We have stepped forward in 2020, we are being on the front line, working with the unions to call for shutting down work and the benefit of Juneteenth. We have also worked in legislation. We have every year we do African American Legislative Day, and we'll be doing it again in February 21st, 2022. Sorry, guys, I'm just way back. I'm way
No,
back.
that's
I need to
perfect.
get back here in the front. But yes,
Well, and
we are
Gabriel,
here in 2022, and
we're
we are
gonna have a section at the end where we'll talk about ways people can get involved. So I think especially with the lobby day, we really want to share more details about that. And we have some time carved out at the end.
Okay,
So
that's great.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gabriel.
But am I done with my time, or I still got more time?
For the introduction piece, this is your time. We're going to have our other
good.
panelists introduce themselves, but that was perfect. Thank you so much. Well, and, we heard now in the spirit of A. Philip Randolph, just sparking the creation of other constituency groups and other working people all across the United States. I wanted to invite Strika Carter, who's the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, to share a little bit more about yourself and why and how you got involved with the labor movement, and maybe even one thing that's exciting that CBTU is working on that you'd like to let us know about.
Okay. Thanks, Casey. I like to start by saying I like to get the people going. I'm a rebel rouser, an organizer, a trade unionist group, and as the political and strategic campaigns director of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, I am a young labor leader, but I'm also a convener of people. I like to bring people together, and whether it's for fun or work, that's my ministry, bringing people together around shared goals. And so when I think about this work and like why I do it, and it's pretty demanding, I do it because I want folks who look like me to see themselves reflected in union leadership. I'm a pharmacy technician by trade, and I've been a union member since I was 16 when I first started working in a pharmacy. And upon my first time at the union office and interaction with the staff representatives, I realized there were no Black women in the shop, and even many years later, there's only one. And so I knew then that I wanted the labor movement to be a movement that I'm proud to belong to, and one that I would not be ashamed of asking my family and friends to join. A movement where leadership reflects the people, which means the policies we support, our collective bargaining agreements, and our organizing campaigns are not only created like with us in mind, but with us leading the way. And so when I turned 32, during introduction for like a whole year, I would be sure to tell folks that I've been a union member for half of my life. I'm 33 now. So I've been a union member for most of my life. And so when I think about the work I've done to advance the labor movement, and especially for people of color, I could talk about being part of the team that delivered millions of signatures to overturn right to work in Ohio as a member political organizer, or writing the first resolutions to be passed from the AFL-CIO bodies to support Black Lives Matter as a young regional organizer, or my work here running the largest electoral field program outside of the state party that's helped elect a historical amount of Black women to the state legislature, and even our first Black women justice right here in Washington. or even the Lord's work that I am doing to mentor and learn from our next generation of labor leaders through the WSLC's Union Summer Program. And in my 3 years as director, 85% of the union summer interns have been people of color. And all of this is good, strong work. But I became a union activist so that my little sisters who would start their first jobs 10 years after me would see themselves reflected when they made their first treks to the union hall. And initially being an activist in the local that my sisters would join was enough for me. But over the years, it's changed. And so when my best friend had issues at work, she called me and told me she needed a union and wanted to know how she could organize her coworkers. When a past coworker of mine who has 2 years on me in the movement, she signed up to be the new stop shop steward in the pharmacy. She called me to tell me. Well, my brother, who is a regional manager of a large manufacturing company in Atlanta, hashtag Organize the South, is now working at his first company with a union for workforce. He called to say that he couldn't just treat the workers any kind of way, that he has to respect the union contract. And they have a voice and they get respect. And so even as a manager, he recognizes and knows the union difference. And so this is what I'm most proud of, the people around me telling me that because of me, they want to get involved, to know that in the lives of my family and friends, I'm making a difference. But the work is bigger than me. It's about all of us, working people coming together collectively to fight and win, right? We're all working for a better life because there is dignity in all work. And that's a quote, Martin Luther King Jr. And so all of us around working people are coming together in unions, demanding a voice on the job. And the work that I'm doing every day to advance racial and economic justice, as Casey mentioned, the work of the Washington State Labor Council, our race and labor program is a model. And if I'm being honest, it's one of the reasons I made the long trek to move 2,200 miles across the country to join the WSLC back in 2018. And the work to have tough conversations about race and to challenge us to, as a movement, to not just know better, but to be better by not perpetuating white supremacy and becoming anti-racist organizations is so important to me. And 16-year-old Sharika is so proud. But that's just what I do during the day, right? And as political and strategic campaigns director at the WSLC. But in my after hours, it's my honor to serve as the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, which is the fiercely independent voice of Black workers within the trade union movement. And we were formed with the mission to challenge organized labor to be in tune to the needs and aspirations of Black and poor workers. And so I love Black people. And so to be able to be unapologetic and advancing the Black agenda, I mean, the work of CBTU is centered on education, healthcare, low-wage workers, mass incarceration, politics, and international affairs. These are the issues that are important to us. And we do this work through our men's under 40, our CARET team, which is the community action and response against toxics, because when we talk about climate justice, we have to center Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so we have the CARET team where we do that work. And so since the earliest days of this nation, when democracy was built on racial exploitation, Black workers have risked our lives to protect and empower our communities through agitation, collective action, and faith. The Coalition of Black Trade Unionists proudly carries that tradition throughout our 50 chapters across the United States and Canada. And so we seek to fulfill the dreams of the Black trade unionists, both living and deceased, who throughout time have courageously and unremittingly struggled to build a national movement that would bring all of our strengths and varied talents to bear in an unending effort to achieve economic, political, and social justice for every American. And so if you are about that, come join us at CBTU.
All right. And thank you so much, Sharika. I just realized one of the questions we got already that I'm going to lift up now is, what does CBTU stand for? Because I know sometimes we in the labor movement love our alphabet soup and use a lot of letters, but remind us again, and then maybe we can, Amy, put the full versions of the constituency groups in the chat for folks as well.
CBTU is the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists.
Beautiful. And from everything that you're working on, from engaging young workers to our legislative and political work, we'll have a lot of ways for folks to get engaged towards the end. So excited to learn more about that, Shrika. Thank you. And we're actually following the order of when constituency groups were established. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. And I'm going to ask Indira to speak on the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, also known as LACLA.
Wow. Thank you so much, Casey. So yes, Latin American LACLA was established 50 years ago. So we're actually going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. And we're going to be having part of that celebration also be here in Seattle, which we're super excited. So do you want me to also give you how
Yeah, if you just tell us a bit about yourself and how you got engaged and maybe one thing you're excited about that LACLA is working on.
Absolutely. Well, my story is very different. I started in the labor movement through the United Farm Workers of America 8 years ago. And that was by chance because I was president of the Latino Student Union when I was at UW. And I learned about farm workers and also had a passion for Portuguese and Brazil. And one of my friends needed me to translate for some coffee workers that were here. And so I did that, and I fell in love with whatever they were showing that was, you know, the work in Brazil in coffee work. So after that, I joined United Farm Workers and as their global impact coordinator, and I needed to go to different places in at different farms throughout the world. I was very privileged to have that job and see the impact of the different labels. Like, I don't know, why is my brain leaving me right now? But the different labels that you buy at the store to see if they're like free of slavery and stuff like that, right? So I got to do that. And then there was some stuff going on here in Washington State with dairy workers. And at first I was like, but that's not what I signed up for. I wanted to go to Brazil and work with coffee workers and practice my Portuguese. But I got sent out to meet with dairy workers here in Washington State and learn about the stories that to this day, I think that's the one thing that continues to move me. And everybody that knows me knows that the reason why I continue to do this work is because of Randy Vasquez, who drowned in a manure lagoon in a dairy farm here in Washington State. And I was the first person that knocked on his family's home to see how we can be helpful. And actually his anniversary is coming up here in February. So that's the moment and the catalyst of my labor movement moment, where I was like, there has to be a way, there has to be, I mean, people have to come together to not let this happen again. Randy was a dairy worker in a dairy farm in Mapton, Washington, and he drowned in this manure lagoon, and he was left there for 8 hours without nobody noticing. And to me, my job is to humanize the people that work, because it's not just robots, right? My job is to make sure it doesn't matter what skin color you are, what ethnic group you affiliate with, right? It is that you're a human. And then at the end of the day, you also have babies, you have a family, you eat, you have emotions, you have all these things. And people forget about that when, because we're just working people, right? So for me is telling the story, not just of Randy, but every worker, Maria Gonzalez, who was sexually harassed in her farm. Workers now, I work for UFCW 21, the largest private sector, union, and representing healthcare workers, right? To hear the story of every worker, of Jordan that works in a mental health facility in Lourdes and Pasco, right? Who has been horrendously assaulted by patients, right? And their employer doesn't do anything. And that's when workers start coming together. So for me, that is the reason why I do the work that I do as a campaigns director for UFCW right now. And my passion is to tell the stories of these workers, to share them when, they're right now, all these healthcare workers, all these essential workers, that have to work double shifts, that don't know what to do with their, child care because they have COVID, or parents that are sick, and nobody is sharing those stories. It is my job to bring them together, to share that, for people to have compassion towards one another. I always like to talk about solidarity, right? And what that means, because people always are like, oh no, I'm doing good in my job. I like my boss, everything is good. But you also are aware that is not like that for everybody, right? So to bridge that gap between, like, if you're good, let's extend the hand to the other, and how we all can come together and be powerful. And I think, like, for me, Dr. King, being president of LACLA, joining the constituency group, being able to sit with all of you here and share those stories and help one another is what drives my passion to be an organizer. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Indira. And also for sharing again, Randy's story. That was, yes, round of applause. I see Sister Eunice. One of my first memories meeting you as a labor sister in the movement was just your tireless work all across the state of Washington, lifting Randy's story and other dairy workers. So thank you so much for reminding us of that and his work and his family. All right, Eunice, would love to invite you to share more about yourself and APALA, and please state what APALA stands for, as well as one thing you're excited about that your constituency group's working on.
Yes, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here on this really powerful panel. Again, my name is Eunice. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, or APALA. We are the API constituency group of the AFL-CIO, also known as the first and the only national organization of Asian American and Pacific Islander, or AAPI workers, most of whom are union members and are allies advancing worker, immigrant, and civil rights. And a little bit about myself and how I came to the movement is that really it's two things in my life. It's my family background and my faith. My parents were born in Malaysia, and my brother and I were born here in the US, and we are ethnically Chinese. My family faced racial discrimination growing up and came to this country to pursue higher education and for a better life. Their first jobs in this country were in food service and restaurants, and I've worked in restaurants before, and so is my brother. So our story is not unique in the immigrant experience, that a lot of us come from different parts of the world to this country for a better life. And in the union movement, we believe that every worker, no matter where they're from, deserves dignity and respect and a good job. I'm also Christian, and so it's so meaningful to be here celebrating the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. I'm a member of University Lutheran Church in North Seattle, and community work is the way I live out my faith. And I found the union when I was a student at the University of Washington doing anti-sweatshop organizing. A fellow student, Amy, actually, who's on this panel, doing all of the support work, she actually recruited me to the union movement because she was doing an internship with Unite here as a student. So shout out to all of you doing amazing internship work. Sharika mentioned the awesome WSLC Union Summer Program. And also the UW Labor Center has a really awesome building a movement, the BAM internship, really, really great work. And it's a really great way to get youth more involved. APALA Seattle has hosted interns for Asian Pacific Islander American young people to work on projects like civic engagement, documenting worker stories and photos, and planning our annual fundraising dinner. And now I'll share a little bit about one of the projects that APALA has really supported and moved forward leaders of color. In the height of COVID, 98 of Unite Here, my union, the hospitality worker labor union, our membership was suddenly laid off. And one of the ways my union rapidly responded was to create a worker assistance hotline. Workers could call in for help like navigating the unemployment system. And Apala helped hugely by sharing their organizer, who is bilingual in Cantonese. I recruited community members like my mom, who speaks Cantonese and Mandarin, and rank and file and community volunteers helped in Spanish, Amharic, French, and other languages. This is part of our commitment to make our union programs accessible and led by people of color and in multiple languages. And a big part of Apala and Unite here is leadership development of people of color. I did not know what to expect when I attended my first Apala meeting, but it felt like home to be in a room of other APIA labor activists. It has been so meaningful for me to be mentored by other strong APIA leaders and leaders of color. And so I hope the work that I do also creates a path and widens the path, as one of my other sisters in the movement says, and brings up the next generation of leaders. Apala's leadership programs and organizing institutes are designed to be culturally appropriate to our APIA community. We host webinars on a variety of topics, including the history of anti-Asian racism that is open to all, not just Asian Pacific Islander folks. We support APIA leaders and members to gain more confidence, to be more active in their union and community. And often our leaders speak other languages, which gives them the opportunity to talk to more workers. And when we know our history, we know ourselves, and we can create a better world for all. And so I'm happy to say we just published our history book for Apala, the Asian American Workers Rising, Apala Struggle to Transform the Labor Movement, to celebrate our 30th anniversary. It's coming up actually this year in May 2022. And I'll talk a little bit about one of our union campaigns later about how we practice racial justice, and then the action items at the end. So yeah, in summary, by centering the voices of workers of color, APIA, Black, brown workers in our movement, all workers are lifted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eunice. And for giving us a sneak peek about the action items. So just a quick reminder, because we've just heard from 4 incredible labor leaders that are presidents of their respective constituency groups. We would love to take questions. We have a couple in the queue. So I was going to perhaps answer those or ask those questions of our panelists right now, and then see if we get any more. And then we'll shift gears to talk about local action and ways that folks can stay engaged. So thank you again to all of our panelists. All right. So one of the first questions that we have is, and I know there's a couple organizers here on our panel as well. So I'll be looking to you, Indira or Eunice, or others, as we're all organizers. The question is it possible to join a union without organizing our coworkers? Failed attempts at organizing is getting discouraging, but I am still wanting to be part of a union, even if my coworkers don't. I think this question is super interesting, particularly as we're talking with labor leaders of color and constituency groups of color. Sometimes, that feeling that you're alone, or that maybe you want to make change, and you're looking around and you don't really know if anyone else is ready to join you. Do you have any advice, or would you like to answer this question directly? Indira, I think you said you would like to start us off while others think about it.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for that question. But how I always, tackle it is, first of all, like, ask yourself why you want to join a union, right? And when you look around, I don't ever encourage people to go and say like, hey, do you want to join a union, and ask that question, right? But more than anything, try to find out if they have issues similar to yours, right? And if you can connect with that, right? So for example, if somebody, at your workplace is, they may have trouble with a point system, or with, being late. And then another one is having issues with somebody that is, always doing indirect, what would I say? I don't know, indirect isms, right, towards them. And then another, you start collecting the issues that everybody has. And then the tool would be to propose coming together. And not, I don't like to always like throw the word union at them, right? But like how, if we all come together to solve this, then then the institution comes in, right? Which is us, the union, right? But the idea is that you guys all come to an agreement that there is issues. I mean, it could be pay issues, it could be, safety issues, it can be identify those issues if there's if you guys have issues. For the people that say that they don't, so then you share yours, right? And they will have like they will have. I was just recently, and I'm just speaking from my just memory right now, I was recently in Texas, and I will never forget this conversation because she really was like, oh no, everything is fine with us, my boss is so amazing and everything like that. I'm like, have you ever seen anybody actually being mistreated, or that is not having the same as you? And oh yeah, they treat people like this and that. And I was like, so would you like for everybody to be treated just like you, right? Like, and they were like, yeah, that would be nice, but I'm not interested, right? And that continued. And I said, well, I mean, I understand that you don't want to get involved because you believe that that you can probably get in trouble and stuff like that. But let's learn more, and people start opening up if you allow them to share more. And I mean, and I know that this is always the answer, right? And that's not the only way, but I think that when we listen, we learn, and then we can take action towards, because I am sure that you're not the only one that wants to improve working conditions in your workplace.
Right on. And I see Gabriel's hand was raised. He may have something to add as well. Thank you, Indira.
Yes. So, that's a very interesting question. But what I want to say that joining a union is the best thing that would ever happen to you in your life, because that gives you protection. It gives you protection on the job. You make more money. You got representation, healthcare, and all the things that you need to have a decent life as a worker. So don't, and one of the main things, the question also include if it's okay to join a union by yourself. I mean, this process, as an organizer, this process of how you join a union when a company does not union. But it always starts with one person. So if you start it, then it will trickle down to the other workers. And basically it works by education, by informing the workers the difference that it makes when you're part of a union, the things that you're going to gain when you stand up and fight for union recognition, because that's what all of us enjoy in the union. I'm glad to be a part of the union I have, And the thing is, I'm not only part of it, but I get to be part of the involvement in it. I'm on the labor relations, and I represent my members when they have to deal with issue with the employers and when they have to deal with issue within themselves on the job. But having that experience and having the ego to learn, I was able to use that as a leader in A. Philip Randolph Institute, because we don't only represent people in our specific union, we represent workers, especially workers of color that are not getting the proper representation in their union. We represent people that are not part of a union because we know the process. We know we have a little experience of all the system work when it comes to representing a worker. And that's the things that many of us have constituency group together have done. And I say together because we need to understand that when we come together, we are stronger. We're able to solve issues, we're able to deal with the problems when we are united as a front. Because many of us have fight issues by ourselves, and a lot of times we get beat down. But when we come as a force, we got the power to strike the mighty punch that could break the chains that people like A. Philip Randolph, Dr. King, and many of our leaders have done in the past, and I encourage many of us to do today. So yes, joining a union is the best thing that can happen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that encouragement. And this question was actually submitted anonymously. So I hope whoever you are, take these words to heart and just know that even simply by you joining this webinar tonight, know that you're not alone. And what an incredible group of labor leaders and union members that we have on this webinar. We're going to be sharing more information about how to join all of the constituency groups we have here, but that's another space that I encourage folks, as Gabriel said, non-union workers are welcome in many of these spaces as well, so that you'll find that you can gain support inside and outside of your workplace. So we can maybe give a sneak peek of the email. I know the State Labor Council, you can get directly in touch with organizers through us, and MLK Labor, who also has an organizing section on their website, as well as a union job resource that we'll be sharing as well. But we could add those in the chat now for our anonymous friend who's joining us. Kevin, I see your hand raised. Would you like to add anything, or can I ask you the next question?
Well, you can do both, but I was just going to say for that person, if they had nuts and bolts questions, those resources that you gave, and there's a feedback form that they could always write on that after the workshop. So that anonymous person can still remain anonymous, but get some feedback. So I just wanted to encourage you, and there may be some mechanisms, nuts and bolts ways that you can get the support that you need. That's all.
Yeah, Washington has the third highest union density in the United States. And I know we're striving to be #1. So this is a great place to form a union or re-engage and reorganize within your existing union. So awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to move to the next question, if that's cool with y'all. We got just a couple minutes before we do our calls to action. And so there's several questions. And so I'll throw out a couple, and then I will let the panelists choose as you see fit. So the first question is, why do you think it's important for unions to engage in racial justice, gender justice, climate justice, or alternatively, what happens if we don't? And then the other question is an option would be, what advice would you give to someone getting ready for their first job? Maybe think back in time, and what would you tell your young self, getting your first job, or maybe something that you wish, or maybe something that someone had told you as a young person, entering the workforce for the first time. So those are a couple options. I'm going to ask Sharika to kick us off, and then I will ask Eunice to follow up Sharika.
Thanks, Casey. I've been thinking about what makes the union strong, and I'm like, it's all of us, right? Solidarity forever. So I'll start there. But for us, if we don't engage in racial, gender, and climate justice, we fail. I know that's heavy to say, but seriously, if we don't do the work to lift up Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women and folks who've been put in the margins and excluded, then surely we will see our demise. The labor unions, all of us make up the union, and we come together for the union makes us strong. But if we are we could consider all the isms, but I'll speak specifically to racism because it's being used as a tool to divide us. And so if we continue to allow it, then our movement is weaker. We don't grow. Sectors of workers aren't organized. If we allow racism to divide us, then all of our voices aren't heard because the union is literally all of us, right? And so that defeats the purpose of bringing folks together. And if I could take a couple more seconds, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and right? And so all of us throughout this unions have had to sound the alarm For safety issues and concerns at work. And so like if we think about our unions and specifically the work we've been doing here in Washington State, coordinated to come together and lift up issues and concerns that like working people have been having. If we collectively didn't have like all of us coming to the table and people of color and women and LGBTQI workers, like if we didn't have a voice at the table, then like some issues, wouldn't have been brought up, right? And so those are just like some of the things to think about. Like, so if people aren't at the table to bring up the issues and concerns, then, we won't have the best collective action.
Thank you, Sharika. Eunice, would love to hear your perspective. And also I have a slide sharing some of the work that you wanted to make sure folks knew about, if you wanted to talk about that as well. And we have like,
yes.
minute or less.
Okay, I'll be really quick. As a union, we are committed to helping working people of all backgrounds achieve racial, social, and economic equality through good jobs covered by union contracts. But we also know that we are workers who lead multi-issue lives. And so our movement must be multi-issue. It must extend beyond the workplace, or else we stand to continue perpetuating the oppressions that exclude and continue to exclude us, like Kevin mentioned in his piece earlier. We call this collective liberation. All of our struggles are interconnected and we cannot win without the other. And one of our campaigns that we're supporting right now and moving and Unite Here, and that we've also spread in Apala, is about hotel housekeepers. Hotel housekeepers are women of color who uniquely experience a oppression at work. It is the hardest job in a hotel. If you think about cleaning 15, 16, 17 rooms a day, when you're pushed to work hard, you have occupational injuries. And especially right now in the pandemic, as we claw our way to recovery, we cannot let housekeepers be left behind. And some hotels are trying to cut their jobs and eliminate their jobs by eliminating daily room cleaning in our hotels. And so I ask that you join me in signing this petition to support housekeepers who are mostly women of color, in demanding that hotel companies like Hilton have daily housekeeping. And also, if you are traveling and are staying at hotels, please go to the front desk when you check in and ask for daily room cleaning. You have that right, and you should support workers having good jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. And I just have up here on the screen other events we wanted to lift, including part of the MLK Junior Day events on Monday, January 17th. There's a morning workshop on union jobs where you can learn more about how to get a local union job. We'll have all these links in the chat, as well as Lobby Day coming up. And I will leave with this slide on the screen before I pass it back to Katie. And ask, because I know Gabriel mentioned that there is a APRI lobby day coming up. If you have the date for that, please let us know now, or we can add it in the chat. And Katie, just let me know when you're ready to
I'm ready.
close us out. All right, thank you.
So you want me to mention that in the chat, or you want me to mention it now on our lobby?
Do you know the date and how we can sign up?
So for the past 17 years, we have done it, and we do it on the President's Day,
Perfect.
February 21st,
Great.
on Charles Wall and African American Legislative Day. And I hope we can turn up. And just to say one thing before you guys cut off, that I hope people heard this constituency group. I hope you guys give support to the hotel workers, because they're one of the lowest paid workers and take the biggest of risks. And we got to really be strong on that. I represent a union that workers that are, when they get in there, they get a good paying job. And we had about 2,000 people that were selected back in the lottery in 2017, and today we down to the last set, and then we're getting ready to go to a new contract negotiation, and that means it's going to be a new hiring coming out. So I want people to be ready to get some of these jobs, because I want to see people of color applying for this job as well and coming into this industry. Not everybody goes to college, but having a good union job sometimes pay you more than a college education. So
Beautiful. Thank you, Gabriel. And Katie, I saw you added in the chat, but if you'd like to let us know about the important evaluations and info on additional workshops happening this week.
Yeah, we ask participants to evaluate each of the workshops. It's enormously helpful in terms of our future planning. So I put the link in the chat, and it will also be in the follow-up letter that you get that will include the resources that have been talked about during this webinar as well. I also put in the chat a link to upcoming workshops, and there are a couple that I think you might be especially interested in. There is one called Learning from the Past, Organizing for the Future. And that we're asking attendees to watch the film Ramps to Nowhere first before they see that. So I'll have the links to the other workshops in that email as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it. This concludes this workshop, and feel free to ask any questions after the workshop. You'll be able to respond to the email that I send out, and I will pass your questions along. Thank you so much. Good night.